Beyond the gate, spoilers tease that Derek is turning Ashley into a spectacle of lies, and that the spectacle will be the slow, polite fraying of a life two people once believed they were building together. The sentence lands like an accusation and a prophecy at once. There is something deliberate in Derek's gentleness, something rehearsed in the way he smiles at monitors and squeezes Ashley's hand when nurses pass by. And there is something feverish in Ashley, the way she stays until the lights are switched off, the way she counts his breaths like beads. The hospital, with its antiseptic hush and fluorescent patients, becomes a stage where private economies of truth and deception are quietly negotiated. The air between them is thick with intentions neither of them says aloud. She wants to save him. He wants to be saved, or at least to be kept. Ashley's nights at Derek's bedside are not cinematic. They are granular and small. She learns the angles of his face by lamplight, the tiny depressions that appear when he concentrates on swallowing, the way his hairline recedes in an uneven crescent. She learns the rhythm of the hospital, the janitor's clink at 2 a.m., the patient in the next room who coughs like an old engine, the soft clack of shoes on linoleum. She reads his chart, not because she is qualified, but because numbers feel like anchors, white sheets, typed words, cold facts that will steady her when conversation with him does not. Derek answers questions with a patient's economy. He gives smiles that don't quite reach the eyes. He gives reassurances that feel designed to quiet the room rather than to convince her. But where the chart does not speak, Jan does. Jan is a careful sort of predator disguised as counsel. To the world she is maternal, officious in the way she folds napkins and arranges medications, offering coffee with advice that always sounds like a gift. To Ashley she is a voice that confers legitimacy, the friend who whispers in the corridor like a priest giving absolution. When Jen suggests that Ashley return to Derek, that she should not let months of tenderness dissolve into what-ifs and maybes, it is phrased as concern but functions like a lever. You've been with him, Jan will say. Who better to give him the life he wants? Don't leave because you think he's fragile. Love isn't a museum. Jan's words are varnished with compassion, and under that sheen is an impatience. Life is short. Rituals matter. Make them now. Her counsel lands in Ashley like a seed. Ashley does not know how much of her own decision is Jan's voice and how much is the shape of anger that has been building inside her, the anger at years wasted on indecision, at the petty cruelties of time. She imagines a wedding as proof that she has acted rather than wait, proof that the narrative will tilt back towards certainty. When she stands beside Derek's bed and asks, she is not theatrical. The question is out of breath and trembling. She frames it as an act of care rather than a demand, practical, urgent, a way to fix the entropy she feels inside. She offers a ring half-heartedly pulled from a pocket. She asks for partnership, for a pact. She asks because Jan suggested it, because the hospital smell has made mortality urgent in a way she cannot ignore, because she wants to make the weeks ahead count. Derek answers the way damaged men learn to answer the difficult things they cannot yet hold. He says yes, and the single syllable is a small surrender and a promise. He says it in a voice that is practiced to sound surprised, grateful. He does not tell her everything, not because he is cruel in the caricatured way some villains are cruel, but because he has chosen a map of small half-truths that allow him to navigate the choices he fears, the hospital visits, the pity, the intimacy of being known as someone who is ill. He delays revealing the full scale of his condition the way a person might delay telling the time. The wrongness, he believes, becomes more bearable if it is parceled out slowly. There is a logic to his delay, perverse and self-serving. If Ashley says yes now, she might stay, and that staying will look like hope, and that hope will make him feel less like a deserter. The lie is not a grand theatrical thing for him, it is a tactic. They decide not to waste time. Weddings are arranged in a week, because time seems suddenly finite and because small towns have rituals ready-made for urgency. A justice of the peace, a minister who knows how to script a ceremony that does not require months of planning, a caterer who will throw together finger sandwiches and a cake on short notice. Invitations are texted and calls made. Some friends roll their eyes and attend like mourners at a life proclaimed. The wedding itself is a small, bright wound, sunlight through stained glass, a few faces with forced smiles, Ashley moving like a woman carrying an impossible weight and managing it with grace. Derek appears composed. He takes Ashley's hand with an intensity that suggests gratitude. The ceremony is suffused with a kind of cinematic inevitability, as if everyone has stepped into a scene whose ending has already been written. In the hush following the vows, Derek's private calculus continues. He tells himself the lies to stay afloat, that his scans show improvement, that the medicine is doing its job, that the worst is averted. He studies the pills and schedules and learns to mimic improvement: a firmer gait after rest, a practiced appetite, a practiced smile for visitors. To him these deceptions are kindness wrapped in convenience. He believes he is sparing Ashley the weight of truth, giving her a chance to choose without panic. He thinks he's made the moral calculation: better a lie that preserves peace than a truth that will break them both. He tells himself he is brave. He believes he saves her from pity by shortchanging her on facts. Meanwhile, other currents ripple through their small community, and the ripples intersect in sharp, surprising ways. Vernon's behavior is a study in paranoia rendered as duty. He has not always been a man inclined to panic, but Allison's brief, brutal theft of his niece Chelsea changed him as an earthquake changes a coastline. It reshapes edges. Chelsea's disappearance was a live wire of terror. No note, no ransom call, no sign, just a small pair of sneakers abandoned under a bush and a neighborhood that felt suddenly like a maze. When Chelsea is returned thin, shaken, full of answers that are not quite truthful, Vernon feels the world tilt back into a semblance of order, but it is an order that now requires reinforcement. He installs locks with the precision of someone who is building fortifications. He buys cameras that blink back red lights like small, unblinking eyes. He places motion sensors along the perimeter and practices the code for the alarm like a prayer. The return of Chelsea is as uncanny as her disappearance had been. She comes back with stories that make adults exchange cautious glances. Allison, according to Chelsea, said she needed someone to listen, that she had been lonely, that she wanted to teach Chelsea things about the world. Chelsea's mouth contains the soft, unnatural phrases children repeat. She was nice. Vernon does not accept niceness as explanation. He wants armor. He wants the world to be a fortress because a fortress can be counted upon to hold. He asks neighbors to watch lights and ring the bell when strangers prowl. He demands that Chelsea sleep in the same room with him for a while. He locks her window at night. His vigilance, to him, is a new moral language. He translates his fear into checks and bolts and cameras. It is Vernon who first notices the small, uncanny details: a scuff on the side gate that had not been there before, a footprint on his stoop he did not recognize, the feeling that eyes watch the house when nobody is there. He is a man who must be right. Proof is his comfort. When the motion alarm, newly installed, glowing like a tiny sun, sounds in the night, he does not hesitate. He grabs his flashlight like a sword and goes into the yard with the fumbling courage of someone who has decided to meet threat head-on. He calls the police and he calls neighbors. His voice is thin but urgent over the phone. The street fills with blue lights and whispering sirens, and the quiet neighborhood, the one with neat lawns and polite fences, suddenly feels like a stage for an unfolding crime. The alarm, when it is checked, is false. There is no sensible intruder, no broken lock, no man crouched in shadow. The camera footage shows a stray cat, a raccoon, a gust of plastic bag rolling like a specter across the lawn. But the false alarm does this not undo the effect of the night. It sharpens the edges of people's attention. Vernon's paranoia, previously tolerable as an eccentricity, is now elevated into communal readiness. People talk about patrols and neighborhood watches. They leave lights on. The sense of the city as a place where neighbors are safe together suffuses even the most casual conversations. In the hush after the false alarm, people realize that the wound of the kidnapping has not only left scars on the family directly involved but has expanded, a kind of infection that changes everyone's sense of safety. Back in the smaller orbit surrounding Derek and Ashley, another narrative unfolds that is quieter and more private. June's new job. June has been promoted into a world that requires a different kind of armor. Her hands shake the first day in the office because authority sits on her shoulders like a new coat, heavy, unfamiliar, and slightly too big. The work is precise, the demands are immediate. She is good at the job in the technical sense, but she lacks the polished demeanors of others whose confidence is a practiced posture. The open plan office is a place where small mistakes are amplified, emails that arrive late, a typo that becomes a joke in the break room, a presentation that stutters. For June, the fear is not only of making mistakes but of being seen as lesser than she knows herself to be. She feels like an imposter moving among people who wear competence as a second skin. Naomi is the foil who steadies her, a woman whose cheer is less saccharine than deliberate. Naomi has done the job and its awkwardness before. She has the worn patience of someone who remembers being new and unsteady. She watches June, not with pity but with a careful optimism that is somehow more dangerous because it risks authenticity rather than consolation. "You're going to be fine," Naomi says, but she says it in the way of a person who has stockpiled specific advice. "Don't apologize for being early. Bring coffee on Tuesday. Learn the names. If they laugh, laugh with them. If they don't, keep your head down for a week and then lift it again." Naomi's counsel is practical, the kind that takes anxiety out of the abstract and places it into manageable actions. June listens and tries. She learns to carry herself as if she belongs in the spaces she occupies. She sets reminders for follow-ups and writes herself sticky notes in pen that will not fade. Naomi watches June at first with a gentle teasing and then with something like affection. She recognizes that the fear in June is not small and that it will not vanish overnight. Naomi encourages persistence because she knows the arc of competence. It grows under pressure and then repays the debt by being reliable. She offers June the way adults offer the scaffolding for a bridge, necessary but temporary. The neighborhood, the hospital, and the office start to feel like rooms in a larger house where the walls are slightly cracked. Everyone's anxieties seep into the shared air. Derek's lies are a private architecture of defense. Vernon's alarms are a public proclamation of the vulnerability they all feel. June's flinches are the small, human faces of social anxiety played out under fluorescent lights. Jan's advice to Ashley, the counsel to act now rather than later, is a catalytic force. It changes the course of two people's lives. It converts care into urgency and urgency into action. But Jan's role is ambiguous. For all the apparent good that spurs Ashley to commit, there is a moral slipperiness in pushing someone into a life-altering decision during a crisis. The question is not only whether Jan's advice is right, but whether the timing of advice is itself a kind of pressure that transforms love into a transaction. Ashley's proposal and the subsequent ceremony do not sit easily on everyone. Friends exchange looks, family members pull aside to whisper. Some accuse Ashley, in private, of trying to fix fate with a vow. Some admire her courage. Derek is mystified by the attention. He is used to people responding to him with pity, not with the active, optimistic gift of marriage. There is irony in the way pity and love circle each other in their household. Ashley's mother calls the union heroic. Ashley's sister calls it desperate. The community chooses its terms. Some will support them based on what they need to believe. Others will keep their distance. But the most consequential thing is not how the neighborhood judges them, it is how they will manage the slow machinery of truth and omission that now hums within their walls. Derek's deception grows like a hushed routine. He learns to edit the way he talks about tests. He speaks in affirmative fragments and introduces little contradictions that can later be shrugged off as misremembered details. The doctor said the scan looked promising, he will tell a visitor, omitting the secondary opinion that sounded more cautious. He allows Ashley to believe that certain nights of discomfort were moments of relapse that will pass. He chooses silence as a strategy, and silence, in that house, becomes as heavy as any declaration. He does not intend harm, he tells himself, but intention does not erase consequence. The lie constructs its own logic, each omission begets another. Each quiet reshaping of the narrative requires the creation of a new small falsehood to maintain coherence. What begins as a fleece to soften the blow becomes a web that tangles them both. Vernon's tightened regime, in its own part, creates a climate of suspicion that makes everybody slightly defensive. He posts notices in the laundry room about being vigilant and organizes a rota of neighbors to check the sidewalk lights at dusk. Chelsea, meanwhile, is strange in ways that worry her family. She is both grateful and guarded, telling parts of her story in fits as if trying the narrative out on the adults to gauge their reaction. She writes in a journal Vernon buys her with a sense of finality. She talks about things she learned, Chelsea says, eyes flicking to the window, as if expecting to find Allison there. Knitting a smile, Vernon senses the fragility under her small, carefully managed exterior. He is determined not to let anything happen again to control the uncontrollable. The false alarm becomes a social event. People gather at the curb to talk in the aftermath, walking through speculation like a delicate map. Someone mentions strange cars seen at odd hours. Someone else draws the line of small, past acts that have made them uneasy. It is a neighborhood reasserting itself, but the reassertion is not comforting. It is tense, like the air before a storm. The community's protective response is a double-edged sword. Communal care is comforting, but the same communal attention turns into surveillance. Cameras become more than about safety, they become a signal about trust, an indicator of the legitimacy of fear. In a different register, June's new job becomes a microcosm of insecurity and growth. She makes mistakes, yes, but she learns how to correct them publicly without letting the shame harden into inhibition. Naomi watches each small victory, a meeting that goes well, a project delivered on time, and offers quiet pats that have the effect of a slow accumulation of confidence. The office becomes a place where June can reclaim agency. For all the broader anxieties circulating through the town, in June's small sphere she experiences the warm, predictable glow of competence. The work is a refuge of routine where she can measure progress in tasks accomplished rather than in the nebulous anxieties of the rest of her life. If Derek is constructing a shelter of lies, and Vernon is building one of bolts and cameras, Naomi and June are building a third shelter, one suspended by daily rituals and reliable promises. The three architectures cross in the same neighborhood but rarely intersect in substantive ways. What brings them into a shared narrative are the accidents of proximity and the human tendency to project the fears of one onto the other. Derek thinks that in sheltering Ashley from the truth he is being merciful. Vernon thinks that in making the perimeter impenetrable he is protecting innocence. Naomi knows that sturdiness does not come from walls alone, it comes from the secure knowledge that when nights are hard, someone will be there to keep watch. The wedding night is a prism that refracts all these tensions. It is small, luminous, and oddly solemn. Derek smiles at Ashley as if he might burst with gratitude, and Ashley responds with a fierce tenderness that is both tender and frightening to see because of the way it is founded on urgency. Jan stands by like a shadowed cheerleader of fate, content that her advice has precipitated something indispensable. Vernon stands at a distance, as if waiting for some test of the world and his defenses. June is at home, looking at her own life and measuring it against the ceremonies she sees on social media: marriage, commitment, permanence. Naomi texts her a line of quiet humor: "We get one celebration a year. You can keep the others for yourself." The texts mean more than they do on the surface. They are tetherings, proof that someone notices. The days that follow feel like a slow-motion negotiation between the interior and the exterior. Derek is better at performing health than he is at being honest. He appears to attend appointments and to speak to specialists who, in his version of the script, nod and speak in carefully optimistic phrases. He posts pictures of the two of them in cafes, of Ashley laughing with a slice of cake, of the two of them at the market, carrying a single bunch of basil. Social media becomes the theater of their happiness, carefully curated and perfumed, and friends comment with hearts. The curated life is not only a defense against pity, it is also a trap. To maintain the image, Derek must continue to craft the narrative in carefully measured increments. The lie grows not only in private but in public, where it demands evidence, and public evidence is trickier to maintain than private pretenses. Vernon, meanwhile, cannot stop thinking of Allison. The woman's motives are opaque. People say things about loneliness, about need, about odd psychologies that operate in the margins. Vernon's anger is not toward an abstract threat but toward the idea that somebody could come and take something as irretrievable as a child's sense of safety. He begins to imagine scenarios, not to act on them but to play them like a film. What would happen if someone tried again? How would he respond? He practices answers like prayers. The false alarm, which should have been an oddity, instead feels like the validation of his fears and the impetus to act more drastically. He begins to have conversations with a neighbor about hiring a private guard. He installs a heavier deadbolt on the back door and buys Chelsea a small, functional alarm she can activate alone. Chelsea accepts these gestures with a mixture of resentment and gratitude. She is old enough to know that protection is also a taste of imprisonment, but young enough to prefer both. As the neighborhood normalizes the alarm's beep and the new locks, as the social media feed dries back to its ordinary surface of smiling lunches and small achievements, the undercurrents persist. Derek's calculus keeps folding inward. He justifies each omission as sparing Ashley pain, yet somewhere underneath the repeated rationalizations, there is a man who is afraid of being reduced to a single identity, that of patient. He wants to be remembered as husband, lover, friend, not merely as case number X. He practices jokes to make people laugh, plants kisses that have the urgency of someone trying to catch light in a jar. He is not certain whether he is a hero or a coward. To him they are qualities that trade places in the dark. And Ashley? She sleeps and wakes like someone who has made a pledge to a future that cannot be guaranteed. She is resolute in ways that terrify and impress. She reads pamphlets about care. She learns to navigate insurance. She keeps a calendar of medication times and tests. Part of the reason she proposed was to assert agency. Part of it was to secure Derek against the possibility of abandonment. But as the days accumulate, she senses gaps in his story that worry her. A normal partner keeps you honest in quiet ways, asks hard questions, presses for appointments. But that is not Jan's style. Jan's style is to nudge in ways that blur consent and urgency. Ashley begins to notice the social pressure that surrounded the decision to marry. She wonders, intermittently, whether she had acted freely or under the weight of others' advice. The town continues to hum with its new nervousness. People lock doors differently now. They speak differently to children, teach them to look around when they walk to school. Even the coffee shop, with its barista who knows everyone's order, becomes an informal post of surveillance where eyes check the street for unfamiliar faces. Naomi and June occupy a smaller, quietly hopeful orbit, their friendship acting like a hinge for June's growing competence. Naomi supports June as she learns to trust herself. She offers a quiet hand that shows, over time, that fear recedes when you replace it with work you can do well. The narrative threads of deception, protection, insecurity, and support begin to pull at one another. Derek's lies create a pressure that could blow at any seam. Vernon's alarms make the neighborhood taut like a drawn bowstring. June's small victories remind us that not all of life's work is high drama. Some of it is a slow accretion of small choices that forge sturdiness. The wedding sits at the center of these tensions like a jewel on a spider's thread, bright but precariously balanced. There is, finally, in the late hours, a sense that the plot has moved from immediate crisis to a slow, charged waiting. The false alarm has taught Vernon to be impatient with ambiguity. Derek's half-truths have made Ashley's confidence a brittle thing that might crack if the wrong question is asked. June feels like the only person quietly rebuilding, yet even she senses the stillness in the air, as if everyone is holding their breath waiting for an event they cannot yet name. The town is alert. The marriage is sealed. The cameras blink red in the dark. The story pauses. They're not finished, not resolved, and heavy with the possibility that the smallest revelation could set off the most complicated chain. In that hush, all the characters are at some kind of threshold, Ashley on the brink of discovery or betrayal, Derek balancing truth against shelter, Vernon ready to spring into defensive fury, June learning to stand taller with Naomi's steady hand. The sound of night closes in. The cameras tick. The alarm sleeps. The future, however, has not agreed to wait.